Welcome to Wrasslin Raw! Alright, you're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when Raw became war and Attitude ruled. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico. Bartlett, you stupid piece of trash. You ain't ever gonna be my co-host, never, because you got a long-haired freak and you suck. So true in so many different ways. Joe Giammatteo.
Some of him is okay, but some of him is disfigured.
Also true in some ways. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history, one episode of Raw is War at a time. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on July 7th, 1997. This Raw was recorded at the Northlands Coliseum in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and features Vince McMahon, Jim Ross, and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready? I'm ready.
Ready?
All right, then, let's get into it. We started this out by calling out the entire nation of Canada and its wrestling fans as hypocrites, citing the so-called blind patriotism of the northern fans.
That probably got you excited, Bartlett, since you hate Canadian fans.
It kind of did a little bit. Man, what a quick turnaround for the WWF. I know we talked about it with the Stampede last week. Pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
Especially with Vince here highlighting the Canadian fans for, quote, cheering the vicious and violent acts, unquote, of the Canadian superstars. But that didn't stop them from popping this crowd with the Hitman's music as the show started. And the Hitman, well, he knows what to do when he's up in Canada. He knows that he needs to pop that fucking Edmonton Oilers jersey hard. And he does it. It made me wonder if there was maybe like a steel plate or cookie sheet inside of it, though, just in case there were some shenanigans. And we got news here that Bret will be taking on the Undertaker for the championship at SummerSlam. So that's good to know. And man, Bret nailed his in-ring promo here. He was playing that crowd like a damn fiddle. I especially liked when one guy in the crowd yelled, "Americans suck!"
Yeah.
Bret just smiled and went, "Yeah." Bret does make a very bold promise, however, stating that if he loses the championship match at SummerSlam, he will never wrestle on American soil ever again. So that's something. Then, much to my delight, Bret introduced the man that he called the best technical wrestler in the world today, his brother Owen, and I fucking popped. Joe, that made me think of you always bringing up how good Bret is at highlighting and putting over others. Really been sticking in my head lately. The more I pay attention to this, the more I see what you're talking about. That's a great call.
Yeah, these boys sure did put over the Edmonton Oilers, too, didn't they?
Yes, they did. You know, Owen looked good, covered in gold, that fantastic leather jacket, the crew cut, simply amazing. We got the news here that Owen will be facing Steve Austin at SummerSlam. I hope that match goes well for everyone. Ugh. Next up, the Bulldog got introduced. Davey Boy will be meeting Ken Shamrock at SummerSlam. Bret then queued up a video of the Canadian flag with an orchestral rendering of the national anthem. I was actually kind of surprised that nobody in the audience there seemed like they were really singing along. But then in what was some of the best timing I've ever seen, just as the song was reaching that crescendo of "Oh Canada," Stone Cold Steve Austin out of nowhere with a steel chair railed Davey Boy and Bret and Owen. Austin wasn't sticking around in the ring. He did hightail it out of there, but he hung out on the ramp for a minute, just enough time to drink up the heat. By God, the crowd was throwing it at him. After a commercial break, we came back to a video review and Vince McMahon saying that rivalry is one thing, but disrespecting the national anthem is just over the line. During that break, Bret Hart had the microphone and gave a great statement to keep the crowd alive, which was immediately canceled out by Vince apologizing to the Canadian fans on behalf of the WWF, as if he wasn't just calling them hypocritical assholes 5 minutes ago. And as if he didn't okay what Stone Cold did. And that's where this segment ended, guys. What a way to kick things off. I am very happy that we've started laying the groundwork for the pay-per-view now by listing some matches off the card. It's giving us some time to chew on that and to let that heat simmer. I'm not even a Canadian, and I was rock hard for this. Joe, what'd you think about how our episode started tonight?
Yeah, really hot start to the show. Absolutely no wrestling, which is the way I like it. Just a bunch of talking in the ring. Like you said, he was playing him like a fiddle. This was excellent fallout from the
Yes.
event last night, the Stampede. So, they're still in Canada. Bret was the man last night, and so was his brother and his brother-in-law and everybody else. So this was a good start. I liked this a lot. Bret, I'm sure they were feeding him things to say, but a lot of the stuff he said is still stuff that, pretty hot topics. Gun control, healthcare, racism. He brings all that up. I was like, oh man, that's crazy. This was 25 years ago. Those are still pretty hot topics there. So just saying nobody is more proud of being Canadian than I am. I mean, is there anything more true than that? Just truthful stuff that's coming from Bret, and I like it. And the Canadian anthem, you just had to know that it was going to get interrupted by somebody. It's just a classic wrestling move, and I loved that too.
Yeah, great way to start it off. As you said, not wrestling here, but hell of a way to handle the fallout of the pay-per-view. Have the hometown, well, I guess Edmonton isn't his hometown, but the Canadian hero here to rile up the crowd. And for the most part, that was true, but there was noticeably more pro Stone Cold signs here than there was in Calgary. Still not a ton.
Yeah.
But a few more. That kind of is shown later when in Stone Cold's match that he does get a little bit of a cheer from the crowd, but Bret Hart does a absolutely fantastic job, though, of just feeding this crowd red meat, just absolute red meat. The anti-American talk, Joe, like you said, this still hits home today. Still our hot button topics, and really knocked it out of the park. Brought down Owen, brought down Davey Boy. Everyone does a good job in the ring, setting things up for SummerSlam. We learn that there's going to be a IC belt defense, a European title defense, a heavyweight defense. So we haven't heard about the tag team yet, but maybe the belts are actually going to mean something here at SummerSlam. So that was good to find out too. The final segment, yeah, you knew it was coming, but it still was great to see it. As the Canadian anthem's playing, Stone Cold comes down and just does the cheap heat, the necessary cheap heat here to interrupt the national anthem, and a big fuck you middle finger to the Canadian fans, just like Bartlett did at the Canadian Stampede. So yeah, I really thought a great segment and a really fantastic way to start Raw off.
Probably one of my favorite parts of this segment was whenever Bret Hart was running down that list of political issues and he got to gun control. Whenever he mentioned that, the camera showed this woman in the crowd going apeshit. She looked just like Peggy Hill up there.
I'll tell you what.
Representative of the typical Canadian woman, I suppose.
Speaking of typical Canadian, there was a sign that said, "Stone Cold seems to like talking about men's asses." So that was like such a Canadian way of putting it. Like anywhere else, it would just say like Stone Cold loves men's asses or something like that. He seems to like talking about men's asses.
I also liked the tasteful choice to leave Jim the Anvil Neidhart out of this equation. Just, personal preference.
I loved the fact that Vince was in the ring and not on commentary, because the commentary was great.
It can only last for so long with that, though, and Vince went back to his proper place. We got the good stuff out of the way. It's not to say the rest of this episode might not be good, but now that Bret Hart is done popping us into the beginning, let's move on to our first match of the night. The Great Sasuke defeats Taka Michinoku by pinfall in 5 minutes and 46 seconds. I was pretty excited to see this. The match these two had last night at the Stampede ended up damn good. But then Brian Christopher came out. He had no business being there, which was highlighted by commentary.
Business.
We had some pre-recorded comments from the Great Sasuke entirely in Japanese, with no effort to translate those at all, aside from some joke gimmick translation from the King and Brian Christopher after Christopher joins commentary. And man, I hate his laugh. Say what you will about the rest of it, but the laugh, I can't stand it. We'll talk more about that later, though. He and the King have great timing together, which is to be expected, but I don't think I could handle more than 5 minutes of it, which still is too much because I felt that this was taking away from the match. It was really obnoxious. Suzuki landed a great standing side kick to Taka's head. That was fantastic. So was Taka's drop kick from the top turnbuckle right after that. And really all of the action here was great. Even the 1 or 2 botches weren't enough to make me lose appreciation for the match. Taka ended up getting pinned from a Thunder Powerbomb. They do make a point of highlighting Brian Christopher leaving the ring area. And that was it for this. Man, I have to admit, I forgot how much I enjoyed watching Taka Michinoku work. And I'm just really looking forward to more of him in the future. Joe, what did you think about our first match here?
Well, if you're into spot fest type wrestling, this is a good one to watch. I mean, I'm a little indifferent on that type of match, but these have been pretty entertaining so far. This is the second night in a row we're getting these guys. Yeah, there were a couple botches there, and there was a lot of catching each other outside the ring, but I don't know. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I thought it was just as good as last night at the Stampede, the match that they had, and I'm interested to see what happens because Taka got buried again here. He lost again, and he's kind of the guy, like they had to have known, like, this is our guy. I mean, this guy is going to have a match like every single week on Raw, so I don't know. I'm just kind of confused by that, and I don't remember Sasuke at all, so I don't know how much longer he's going to be there. I guess we'll see, and I agree with you. Brian Christopher is absolutely terrible on commentary. He has that thick Tennessee accent mixed with that high-pitched fake clown laugh that he does. It's just so terrible. It's so fucking cringy. But I don't know, these two guys, Sasuke and Taka, they entertained me enough that it wasn't too much of a distraction, I guess.
Yeah, I'd agree with that assessment from both of you guys. It wasn't a terrible match by any means and pretty damn entertaining, just like last night. The only thing that I don't understand is tonight here, I'm actually primed for this match. So why didn't they have this match before the pay-per-view so that the pay-per-view match had a little bit more of a build-up for it?
Especially after that Sasuke promo.
Yes, especially. I mean, that was one of the hottest promos of the year.
He's a samurai.
But it was almost ruined by Brian Christopher's commentary, though. Him yakking it up the entire time with the King. And I'm glad we all brought up his fucking ridiculous fake cackle, because the moment he started doing it, I was like transported back 20-some years ago, and I remembered just hating that annoying fucking laugh from Grandmaster Sexay. So that was just terrible. So I'm glad we all were haunted by that terrible laugh. But thankfully he couldn't completely ruin it because, it was a spot fest for sure, but pretty damn entertaining. They had a bunch of high spots again, and these guys work good together. Sometimes high spots look a little too choreographed, but, well, I think it's that Japanese stiff style that help kind of put it over and make it look a little bit more realistic. So, yeah, a very solid match. I just wish Grandmaster Sexay wasn't out here to bring up Scott Putski's fucking name at the end here either. Reminded us that he existed. So if we get those two guys out and focus more on Taka, I'd be happy. But I was entertained for sure by the match.
Yeah, for sure. I do agree with that. Brian Christopher, this isn't the last that we get of him. He'll be in action later on tonight. We'll also be getting some time with Paul Bearer, we find out. But we'll also be getting Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley later. I'm looking forward to talking about that with you guys, as well as the Hitman versus Goldust. I was once again just happy to be being told what matches to expect, because that has a better chance of keeping me tuned in for later, keeping my excitement up or my anticipation up. All of the goodwill that was built up with that information being given to us, well, that was destroyed by the sound of revving motorcycles, and we know what that means.
I know what it means. 83 weeks.
Next up will be Crush versus Savio Vega, and Los Boricuas are looking more and more Clockwork Orange here. The on-screen graphic for the match shows the two gangs, and Savio and his crew are wearing a fucking top hat or some shit as part of the all-white costume now.
Yeah, it looked like they're out of a musical or something.
Of course, right after that, we had to get a video package highlighting what has happened in the past in an attempt to make us give a shit. And that's where it ended. On the one hand, I like it when they give us a heads up on what matches to expect. But on the other hand, I don't like it when I'm being force-fed Crush and anything having to do with him. Ryan, what'd you think about this mid-match segment?
Oh, the moment I heard the stupid fucking motorcycles revving, I was hoping for the cat to go into the litter box so I could find something to dig
Drop
for.
a big one.
Get in there, girl. Go on.
Speaking of the fucking honey dippers, they come down. Their bikes, Lawler, I'm glad, made a comment about it because you could see this giant smoke screen that the front row of the crowd here had to breathe in for the first few minutes.
Oh my God.
So I'm so glad that this useless piece of shit come out here and gas the fans. But the match, nothing. I mean, we have Savio and Crush. I don't understand why Crush has to just keep on being on our screens, and I really don't understand why this fucking Canadian crowd started chanting for the disciples of the Honey Dipper. Unbelievable. Bartlett, after this, I was kind of in your corner with the Canadian fans, just fed up with them.
I hope it was piped in.
I really hope it was, because I don't want to lose all respect for these Canadian fans. And then it dissolves into chaos and there's a disqualification. And I will say I ended up having to rewind it like 3 times and I wasn't correct in what I heard the first time. So JR, as the disqualification happens, JR says these two factions are really going at it tonight. The first time I heard it, I thought he said these two fascists, referring to the two stupid Nazi fuck twin brothers that are part of the Disciples of Dipshits. So I was, after I rewound it about 4 times, I was glad I straightened it out that he said factions. But that was the most exciting part of the match. That was the only thing that really got me, a little interested. But other than that, quite a dud if we were giving it a rating.
Well, we didn't actually get to the match yet.
Well, we might as well get it
done with
fucking over with. I'm changing the channel, so it doesn't matter, I guess, about the match. 83 weeks. What a hot start to the show, We get Bret Hart coming out here, then we get the rest of the Harts, then we get Taka and Sasuke, then we get this trash, That's gonna just cause all kinds of problems. I know I'm gonna sound like a pussy, but I fucking hate the sound of a motorcycle revving. I hate it. It doesn't matter where I am. I can't stand it. If I was in the arena, I'd just go to the bathroom or something so I don't have to fucking hear that. Vince has yelled unbelievable at least 6 times already tonight. And both of these factions, Bariquas and Disciples of Jailbird, are trash. And it's because their leaders are not top tier guys. Like, I respect the Savio, but he's not Bret Hart. He's not, or even Farouk for that matter. Ron Simmons was a former WCW champion. So I don't know. That's really what's going on here. We have these factions that nobody gives a shit about because they don't have a legit top tier guy leading them.
Yeah, completely agreed with that. And just for our listeners here, this match was Crush with the Disciples of Apocalypse versus Savio Vega with Los Bariquas.
I apologize. I just, went into it.
You needed to get it over with.
Well, I mean, even the advertised finish, or at least the recorded finish of a double countout in 2 minutes and 42 seconds was bullshit. We still haven't even been given the names. Like the
faction warfare.
An official introduction to any of these people besides Crush and Savio.
That is true, yeah. Good point.
My only favorite part of this was that now they have roadies there ready to move the fucking ring stairs out of the way so the bikes can get in and out.
Oh my God, yeah.
I look forward to more gangbangs, I guess, between these people, so whatever. All right, after that, we got a great shot of Paul Bearer waiting to talk to us. What a beautiful sight that was. And then our first promotional video for SummerSlam, the subtitle being Heart and Soul, brought to us once again by Stridex, and the perfect follow-up to all those years of Domino's sponsorship. We went to Paul Bearer after that to be prompted by Vince to apologize for calling The Undertaker a murderer 93,000 times in that championship match at the Stampede last night. Vince interrupted Paul Bearer, and I loved Paul Bearer's reaction, stating that Kane's alive. That's how Paul knows the Undertaker's a murderer, on and on. Kane is apparently totally disfigured, even though some of him is okay. I guess the pain of all the operations and skin grafts and the sun allergy that he's developed have inspired young Kane to become a professional wrestler and seek revenge, much like the murder of his parents inspired The Undertaker to become a wrestler and seek revenge. Paul says that hate is the strongest human emotion there is, and all I could hear is Jim Cornette in the background just yelling, "Hate is a hell of a motivator." And that's it. Another short mid-match segment, but chock full of the beauty of Paul Bearer. Joe, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, beauty is a good word for it, for sure. More of the Kane story here. You know, they're going to just keep saying Kane's name, right? They're just going to keep driving that home. They want us to know that this guy is around and possibly going to show up. So we're going to hear that name a lot. And I like the name that they tagged onto SummerSlam, Heart and Soul. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, a good Paul Bearer promo. He does a fantastic job of just telling this story. He continues to call Undertaker a murderer, so that was good. And then he goes into graphic detail about Kane's twisted body, so that was kind of cool too. So great job by Paul Bearer just doing his thing. He does it well.
And looks good doing it.
Well, yeah, the most beautiful man in wrestling.
Speaking of people that look good doing what they're doing, let's go now to our next match. The Hart Foundation, Owen Hart and the British Bulldog, with Brian Pillman and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, he's the one exception there, defeat the Nation of Domination, this being Farouk and D'Lo Brown with Kama Mustafa on the outside, by countout in 6 minutes and 50 seconds in the WWF Tag Team Title Tournament Final. I love the Nation without Ahmed here. Kama was a perfect addition. He and Farouk and D'Lo, the three of them just look great together. They're like one of those Russian nesting dolls, you know? Short D'Lo, middle-sized Farouk, big tall Kama. Great image there. Brian Pillman had a Nation of Masturbation sign. I didn't see if he brought that with him or if he pulled it out from the crowd. But then we went to Stone Cold Steve Austin, who has a vested interest in the outcome of this match, as the winner will face Austin and a currently unnamed partner for the tag team titles. Austin stated that Vince must have manure for brains. Vince must not be listening because Austin doesn't care. Mankind is a freak. And to be fair, Austin has been repeating these lines ad nauseum because Vince has been asking these questions ad nauseum for weeks now. Austin finally tells Vince to shut up, which gives Vince a conniption, yelling, "You're out of line." The match started with Owen and D'Lo Brown, my two favorite neck breakers. What a great way to kick things off. I noticed a sign in the crowd that said, "Putski Power."
No.
Well, you guys would be excited to see that.
I saw that. I almost turned it off.
This match was kind of a cluster because the ref distraction and interference was non-stop throughout. D'Lo and Farouk hit that wishbone move, and all I could think of is that it wasn't nearly as impressive as when Owen and Davey Boy do it. The timing was just a little bit off there. I loved JR highlighting that D'Lo is a college graduate and certified public accountant. Thank you, Jim Ross. That's the kind of shit I love hearing.
Let's all be thankful that Vince already used a taxman gimmick.
Right.
and didn't saddle D'Lo with it.
The timing with the ref distractions, though, that was great. As much as it's not my cup of tea, I have to admit that this clusterfuck was a very well-working clusterfuck. It was very smooth. I loved D'Lo holding the Bulldog down with a shin bone across the throat. What a great visual that was. And the hot tag to Owen produced a great series of Owen Hart taking people out one after the other like a well-oiled machine. And that's where the match devolved into a brawl outside, with Owen just barely getting into the ring in time to get the count out in favor of the Hart Foundation. But then Mankind showed up wearing a Steve Austin shirt, making threats about winning the belt next week, and that's where this ended. To be clear, I mean, this was a clusterfuck through and through, but I was entertained by every minute of it. And I have to say that my biggest takeaway was that D'Lo Brown, the greenest of the group here, worked in a ring with three veterans and looked just as good as they did. In my opinion, we still have not seen a bad D'Lo Brown match yet. Joe, what'd you think about the tag team tournament final here?
Was it a tournament final? It seems like nobody gave a shit about that, right?
Too true.
I actually forgot it was until they started the match. So, Yeah, that goes to show where we are once again with the tag team division and situation. The dynamic between Farouk and D'Lo is great to me, and that's because Farouk is a great leader of a faction. He's barking orders at D'Lo, and D'Lo does what he says, as a true henchman would do. So I think they have a really good dynamic between the two of them. They worked very well together as a tag team, and I popped when JR told us about D'Lo being a CPA. I also popped when Lawler, they talked about Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier being Edmonton Oilers, and I laughed when Lawler said, yeah, then they smartened up and went down to the United States and made a bunch of money. So that was funny. Now, here's what pissed me off about this. We had the match before this were those two shitty factions. We had a double DQ when one of the factions got involved outside. But this match was not a DQ. Like the same fucking thing happened.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little off, but whatever. It's still professionals in the ring, so it was entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, starting off with D'Lo Brown and Owen, first thing in the ring, they look great together. And Bartlett, to your point, yeah, I can't think of a bad D'Lo Brown match yet. He's done, a hell of a job since he's came into the WWF, and, the action stayed up. The Nation is coming together as a much, much better faction now that they are the new Nation. And now I think they just kind of got lucky with Ahmed Johnson getting injured, so he can't, he can't bring the Nation down. But they're just these three guys up against the Hart Foundation. It was a good faction on faction match. And yeah, Joe, like you said, last match, we had two shitty factions that are really, the byproduct of the Nation of Domination. We end up with these two lesser factions, and this is how it's done. This is how you build up a good match with good heat and get the crowd excited to actually watch it. But Joe, I'm definitely in your corner with the ending soured it a little bit, because yeah, at points there were some good distractions to the ref, but at the final point, the ref was looking right at him as Brian Pillman was beating a flag over the back. And no disqualification. He just gives the win to Owen and counts him out. So that was a little bit ridiculous, but again, yeah, I guess I'll allow it because it was one of the more entertaining tag matches we've had in a while. So, okay.
Yeah, having a tag match that is actually fun to watch goes a hell of a long way right now in 1997. So I'm with you there. I'll take what I can get. After that, we went backstage again with Stone Cold Steve Austin, this time to talk about his upcoming match against Hunter Hearst Helmsley and his 200-pound bodyguard. Austin laid down some great lines, as in, King of the Ring, well, I've been there, done that. Hunter likes cans of caviar, well, he's going to get served a can of whoop-ass. And when it comes to Chyna, Steve says he's not above punching a woman's lights out, and I fucking popped. When Vince says, "Thank you for joining us," in a very condescending tone, Austin replies with, "Shut up," and I fucking popped again. And that is where our first hour ended to move into the second hour, and Raw is War. What a great way to keep everyone tuned in. This was a short one, but it was a pretty good transitional piece. Ryan, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a short piece, but Austin did a great job backstage, just kind of now setting up his match with Hunter. Earlier he was doing the setup with Mankind. Now he's talking about Hunter and saying he's got no problem punching a woman. So good stuff out of Austin.
Yeah, it's funny to hear that. It's funny to hear Austin get mouthy with Vince. So I enjoyed it.
Well, without further ado, let's go into our next match. Stone Cold Steve Austin defeats Hunter Hearst Helmsley with Chyna by pinfall in 9 minutes and 26 seconds. I don't know why, but I loved Hunter coming out with a bandage on his forehead after that Stampede match against Mankind last night. It was like one final little way to put over Mankind in the match they had. I also love how Hunter doesn't make Chyna take his robe out of the ring. Chyna is an independent entity here. I really like that. Hunter hands it off to somebody else so that Chyna doesn't have to break that pose. I also loved Helmsley holding on to the ropes, working that into a nose-to-nose jaw session there after things get started. Austin does the same thing after that, except worked into a mocking pose of Hunter's bow. This match had me hooked right from the get-go. I was very happily shocked at how fast and tight this match was from the start. It was almost like this was giving me pay-per-view energy, and I was all about it. I did have to note where Hunter sold up over the top turnbuckle again. That got an unbelievable from Vince. I had to chuckle a little at the miscommunication and getting Hunter back into the ring. Steve was trying to pull him over, Hunter was trying to climb under, and then they reversed, switched places. It was kind of funny. I did not like that they had to go to commercial in the middle of this because I was, again, hooked into it. But that's just me being a nitpicking dickbag because the vast majority of the work here remained fast and tight after the break. Vince called Chyna mesomorph. That took me back. And I also loved the tension that Chyna built. Anytime Austin got close to her, I was wondering if that was the time that she would interfere. You knew it was coming. You just didn't know where. And every time Austin got closer and closer to the point where he was coming off the ropes right in front of her. And she, didn't touch him throughout the match until when she finally did. It was a delicious payoff because she had set up the spot. She had already left a steel chair in the ring. Her timing was perfect there because she was able to distract the referee long enough for Hunter to grab the chair. But then Mankind out of nowhere. That's where Hunter ended up directing the chair shot. That perfect timing continued because as soon as Hunter knocked Mankind off the apron with that chair, Stone Cold was already in the perfect position to hit a stunner that gave Austin the pin and the win. But it didn't end there. After the match was over, Austin grabbed a microphone to tell that long-haired freak, Mankind, to get in the ring. Austin even says, "There ain't no way one chair can keep your ass down. Get in the ring." And I fucking popped. Joe made me think of you again. This is a good professional wrestler because he is putting over the other guy. It might be a backhanded compliment, but he's still putting Mankind over, even in the least way there. Austin says, "Shake my hand, we're a tag team." Mankind wants a hug, though, and he does get it. But that gives Austin the opportunity to hit a stunner on Mankind, putting Mankind to the mat. Austin grabs a mic and was literally crawling all over Mankind with the microphone, screaming in his face, "DTA, you stupid piece of trash. Don't trust anybody." And I fucking popped again. Just as Austin was leaving, Mankind got the microphone, and Mankind threatened that drastic measures must be taken now, with Austin giving a great response in his facial features. Mankind says neither the WWF, Steve Austin, nor Mankind will ever be the same, and I popped one last time as this segment ended. Whew, by God, boys, what a fucking match. What a great post-match piece. And, I shouldn't be that surprised because, look at the 4 people in the mix here, but I still can't help but be shocked at how great this shit was, pal. Ryan, what'd you think of this match and its aftermath?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You shouldn't be surprised, Stone Cold, Hunter, Hearst, Helmsley, but it was even better than what I expected.
Yeah.
Stone Cold, he comes out. It feels like he's trying to dig back into his ringmaster days here in Canada, trying to get the crowd to boo him. And he does the best he can with that. But it doesn't really matter if he can get the correct heat here or not, because these 2 talented motherfuckers know how to wrestle. And everything about it was just perfect. The pace, the smoothness of the moves between each other, the way that they were selling, just everything looked fantastic. And I definitely had flashbacks to a few years ago when Vince breaks out the mesomorphic word referring to Chyna. It, really brought me back. But after a really fantastic match, we get an even better ending. You said about how good the timing was, and it was just perfect. The moment Mankind takes that chair shot from Hunter, Stone Cold's there ready to pounce and get the victory. And then after the match, when he calls in Mankind Mankind into the ring. You knew it was coming, but it didn't dull it at all, because when he sprung on him like the rattlesnake he is, and then just started getting in his face and calling him basically a worthless motherfucker, it was really, really fantastic shit. And then Mankind coming out and saying he's going to have to do something drastic, and I think we all know what that's going to be. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. Great match with a really great ending.
Yeah, I know that they have to start the second hour pretty hot, but this should have ended the show.
Yeah,
I think this should have closed the episode, but too late, So that this was that good. The match and post-match, JR during the match drops a real gem saying that Helmsley is a thinking man's wrestler, which is just a perfect description and really tells a lot for what the type of career that Helmsley had, the cerebral assassin and all those other sayings that JR came up with later. So that was cool to hear that. Chyna, again, great use of Chyna. Are we going to believe that she's going to really have much of an impact on a superstar like Steve Austin? Well, she had to be smart about it, so I liked that. The shot to Mankind's head was actually pretty damn funny. This whole pick me Steve angle is actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
But also, Mankind can shift into the psychotic, like he was funny, then he got the don't trust anybody Stone Cold Stunner, and then he switched into pissed off Mankind. And that was good stuff.
He just wanted a friend.
Yeah. I believe he's cluing us in on Dude Love. Is that what we're going to get, maybe? And I am coming day and night because I fucking love Dude Love. I love the shot of the camera where he's tapping his feet, and then the camera zooms up. You get that classic shot of Dude Love's introduction. Like, I am so fucking excited for that.
Yeah, same here. And this, so, I mean, I'm pretty goddamn high on this match, but the post-match stuff was so equally good. In the match, this is something that was running through my mind the whole time. We had 5,000 goddamn matches between Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust. And as much as I love Goldust, as much as I appreciate what he can do in the ring, he's been the drizzling shits lately. But in those matches, they got so tired and so repetitive that you started to lose sight of how good both of those guys were. And slowly but surely, ever since his King of the Ring win, and Hunter has been taken off of that double secret probation or what the fuck ever after the curtain call, his burial is over. And he's finally being allowed to build some stories with some quality competitors. And he hasn't missed an opportunity to do that yet. Between Mankind first and now Stone Cold Steve Austin, he has delivered on his potential, on his promise. And I think it's this rebound that really helps to solidify him as a young up-and-coming future son-in-law.
Yeah, there's he's on the rise. There's no looking back, that's for sure.
Yeah. And also, this match, really the post-match segment had something that I was always a huge fan of. You don't see it as much in his later career, but Stone Cold doing that just almost like obnoxious manic crawling all over somebody while they're on the ground. Like literally just back and forth slithering. Ryan, you put it in a perfect way, like a rattlesnake slithering over a carcass, just in their face with the microphone going off. Just a fantastic fucking visual. I love it. I was coming day and night. My goodness. All right. Well, there wasn't much room in between that.
Speaking of coming day and night.
Oh, God. Our next match. Brian Christopher defeats Eric Shelley by pinfall in 3 minutes and 52 seconds. I was surprised to see Sunny introducing this match. She looked a little rough. Maybe,
I thought it was funny, like we came back from break and just we're immediately looking at Sunny's boobs.
Yeah.
The cans hanging out there. She was looking like maybe she had not enough sleep or too much drugs. I'm not sure which, same deal. And I forgot which one of you had mentioned dreading the thought of it a couple weeks ago, but here is where we got the news that Jerry Lawler and Brian Christopher will be taking on Ivan and Scott Putski on Raw next week.
At least it's on Raw. At least they're not making people pay for that shit.
What are you talking about? That's a pay-per-view level match. Come on.
Well, and I was going to say, I think that was just a prediction from Joe.
Okay.
He felt it looked like they were trying to build that. Oh, you knew that was going to happen.
Well, no, I didn't know. I had that feeling, that your neighbor was coming in to lay the smackdown on somebody.
Well, it takes a talent like Jerry Lawler to get somebody to leave Western Pennsylvania. I did like Brian Christopher trying to grab Eric Shelley's hair, since Eric Shelley was bald. That was a nice little touch. But, he worked it, though. That's the thing, is he tried to grab his hair, but he worked the fact that he couldn't find anything to grab and lost his hold in the exchange because of that. Eric Shelley, he didn't look all that great. But I do have to admit that Brian Christopher looked better. He wasn't that, you'd have to expect it. I mean, being Jerry Lawler's son, but neither of these guys is Taka Michinoku, so there's that.
Or Scott Putski.
On the opposite end of the spectrum there. There were a lot of Polish jokes from commentary as a result of that challenge being answered by Lawler. And then we got to the finish, which was underwhelming. Sonny announced the winner sitting down at ringside. She didn't even get up out of the steel chair. That prompted Vince to say, "Thank you, Sonny, for joining us." Lawler got in the ring then. He and Brian Christopher worked on Eric Shelley for a minute before Lawler got on the microphone to put over the match next week, and that's where this ended. So I'm going to qualify this statement by saying that this does not apply to whatever might happen in the future. But at this point, in 1997, I don't think I like Brian Christopher at all. And I don't mean that in a heel way. I mean go home heat kind of way. Yeah. He's not only too sexy and too cool, he's too fucking obnoxious. In the ring, out of the ring, everywhere. Joe, what'd you think of this match?
It's not good. There's more fuel for a Scott and Ivan Putski feud with Lawlers that nobody cares about.
Everybody wants it. What are you talking about? Come on.
Yeah, I don't want it, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, this was piss poor. The match is pretty much forgotten from the very beginning as Lawler talks about Ivan Putski and this tag team double team up match that they're going to have. And, maybe ignoring this match was for the best because Eric Shelley was not very good. Towards the end of the match, he tries to do a nip up and he doesn't quite make it. And, a nip up is one of those things that you want to make sure you can actually nail before you try it on national television. And that piss poor attempt at a nip
How
up.
humiliating.
It's why he did not get Jobber of the Week this week.
Oh, no.
I have to keep some standard of quality here for this great achievement. Not to mention there wasn't much to really find on him. He has 1 or 2 more matches in the WWF and then about 15 matches over the next 20 years. So not really a bunch of information to find out about him anyway, but he did not deserve it anyway.
That's another really great way of looking at things. A nip up is something that you don't want to half-ass. That's either full commitment and full skill and execution, or you just don't fucking do it.
Or you end up not really having a wrestling career like Eric Shelley.
Right.
And there's a reason why that move is only performed by some of the best ever.
Right.
I just keep on seeing it in my head.
Don't do shit you don't know how to do.
Didn't quite have the pizzazz of Owens last night.
Right. I really am trying to withhold any kind of judgment for future Brian Christopher, because if I remember correctly, whenever he gets in with Scott Taylor and Rikishi, he doesn't really talk at all.
Oh, I think you're wrong.
I think they're pretty annoying.
Yeah, that's why I was saying earlier when that laugh, it brought me back to remembering him talking because he keeps that annoying cackle.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I must have just blocked it out. All right, well, let's move on here because next up, the glass broke and Stone Cold Steve Austin came back out. We've gotten a lot of Stone Cold tonight, with JR listing the dates that Austin will be appearing at events coming up between now and his IC title match. Got to get those ticket sales up, pal. Austin will be taking on Owen Hart at SummerSlam for the IC title, like we said earlier. Vince is there in the ring for the interview and starts with, "You were handcuffed. They had to restrain you. Look at the gestures you were making with your hands."
Hand gestures. What kind of man does that?
Austin responded with, "To hell with the Canadian fans," and I fucking popped.
Nah, of course you did.
Vince asks for the umpteenth time who Austin's tag partner will be. Austin didn't want to hear it. In regard to the IC title match, Austin said that he'll kiss Owen Hart's ass if he loses. And Jerry Lawler brought up the Kiss My Foot match, and I started having flashbacks.
Oh, man.
With that news about Austin saying he'll kiss Owen Hart's ass, JR responded with, "Oh, good grief." And I popped again. After that, we got some pre-recorded comments from Goldust, and it was actually somewhat bizarre. I was happy to get some weirdness here. I guess, we're in this weird bizarro world of Canada where the baby faces are heels and the heels are baby faces. So in this one instance, it works in the other instances too, but at least here it was nice to get a taste of the old Goldust. And that's it for this. Joe, what'd you think about Austin's interview and Goldust kind of acting like his old self again?
Yeah, very good point. I think Goldust is trying to be Goldust again here, but it's still kind of ruined for most of us here. Yeah. He's got a long way to go, and he's got to climb back out. So I don't know, but the Austin interview was good. I'm sure Vince loved that fat joke that he made about Gorilla Monsoon. Ass kissing, he seems to like to talk about men's asses. It's all just funny shit. Maybe they'll have a Double Dare ass next week that they're gonna break out.
Yeah, Stone Cold, this is another situation where this Raw is the Stone Cold show. Yeah, he's interjecting himself in every segment, and that's a good thing. Almost every time that's happened, that's been a good Raw. And comes out here, does a good interview with Vince McMahon, cuts, pretty by-the-book Stone Cold promo at this point. And I don't mean that in a bad way. He's kind of honed it to a fine edge at this point, and he knows how to deliver it. And he does that here. And the only thing that I really take away is it's really tough to hear them continue to build up the Owen Stone Cold match. Knowing how things are going to end up, it's just
good grief.
Yeah, it's kind of rough, but he does a good job here.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And speaking of things that are rough, let's go into our final match of the night. Bret Hart defeats Goldust by pinfall in 10 minutes and 26 seconds. I liked Jerry Lawler here saying that the Hart family tree needs a trimming. That was a clever line, I thought. JR had to fucking mention Dusty Rhodes in his relation to Goldust yet again. That made me want to vomit a little. And things were okay in the match for a couple minutes, but then I died a little inside as the sound of motorcycles interrupted the crowd noise. And sure enough, the fucking Honey Dipper came out with his gang on their bikes. And once again, the roadies had to move the ring stairs out of the way for them.
Once again, the crowd got gassed.
The rest of the Hart Foundation came down in response. Meanwhile, Goldust was in there just kind of flapping in the wind, just trying to have his match with Bret Hart. JR asked why the DOA is there. I was wondering the same thing, JR. Thanks.
No business at all. None.
Yeah, no relation to any of this. Those goddamn motorcycles were really in the way at the outside. After another couple minutes, Bret and Goldust were just kind of doing their thing, having a lukewarm match in the ring because there wasn't enough room to go outside of the ring. And then LOD and Ken Shamrock came out, and that's where I officially tapped out on this
No
one.
business.
And then Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Why not?
Up at the top of the ramp, JR started really leaning into the "one spark is all it's going to take to blow it all up" rhetoric. Bret eventually won with a badly worked pin on Goldust's part, but I'm pretty sure I had seen referee Earl Hebner yell at them to go home leading up to that, so it wasn't a surprise. This episode ended with Stone Cold laughing at the top of the ring, and that powder keg that JR and Vince had been yelling about fizzled the fuck out as we faded to black. Man, this episode, it was hot and cold for me. We had a couple of really, really great matches and great segments, and then we had a couple of pretty solid stinkers. But this match and its finish were probably the biggest disappointment of the night for me. Ryan, what'd you think of our final match and the way that Raw ended?
Yeah, it really was a big disappointment. It started off, and at the very start, it looked like it was going to be serviceable, at least with Goldust and the Hitman. But yeah, the moment that the fucking motorcycle sound came on, this match just fucking nosedived into the goddamn mountain. I mean, honestly, we had them come down, then we kind of maybe focus on the match for 30 seconds more, then LOD comes down with Ken Shamrock, then a second later Stone Cold. By the time we got to the end of the match, it was completely impossible to even remotely focus on the ring. There was just so much bullshit and commotion going on around the ring. And it was a poorly worked pin here because they probably couldn't focus on the match either. A really bad way and a way to ruin two really good wrestlers with just bringing down the entire fucking backstage locker room to get around the ring.
Yeah, I guess I would be just changing the channel and watching Sting point a baseball bat at some guys. I mean, I know that doesn't sound that exciting, but it's certainly more exciting than this, the jailbirds out here on their bikes again, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is terrible. There's like 15 people out here just watching this match. For what reason? Nobody knows. None of them have any business being down here.
None at all.
And having all these guys come out is just a complete fucking waste of time. It's just a shitty ending to the show. There's too many feuds going on, I guess. Like, you have some good ones to work with, and this is just fucking confusing everything. Bret Hart has a match coming up with The Undertaker for the title. So what does any of this have to do with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was especially confused with the Disciples of the Honey Dipper, because what the fuck do they have to do with either of these guys, really?
I'm sure Undertaker behind the scenes probably got them a little
push.
A little push.
Well, I was thinking that it was maybe in response to the crowd reaction to the DOA earlier. They were chanting for them, for fuck's sake. So I thought maybe they improvised it to give the crowd a little something.
Fucking Edmonton crowd.
Those Canadian fans.
Fucking jackasses.
I'm telling you, I mean, we might want to write a letter to Canada.
I think you were onto something, Bartlett.
One part of it that kind of gave me a little bit of hope was you've got Bret Hart and you've got Goldust here. We know they can work. And maybe the bikes on the outside will limit the action to the ring, and we'll get a technical match. They can't go outside. They can't get into shenanigans because the fucking bikes are in the way. So maybe it'll keep it corralled in the ring where Bret Hart can really shine, but no, it just all fucking down the shitter, flush. Well, as I said, we faded to black, so let's take it on over now to highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, my highlight is the Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Stone Cold match and post-match stuff with Mankind. My lowlight, even though I really hated the ending of this episode, I have to go with Brian Christopher on commentary. I thought that was the worst part of this show.
Our highlight and lowlights are going to be very, very close. My highlight is the Stone Cold versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley match. Great match and a very, very good ending to it. So that was definitely the highlight. Low light, I'm just going with the Eric Shelley versus Brian Christopher match in general. It missed the mark on very, very many levels.
We're 3 for 3 on highlights here. Austin versus Helmsley and its aftermath. Every bit of that entire segment was entertaining. Really one of the best Raw is War matches in recent memory.
Yeah.
A couple months at least, probably more. But also, you know what? Honorable mention to the amount of buildup they've already given SummerSlam. And first day after last night's pay-per-view, that's something that we've been complaining about for a couple pay-per-views now, the lack of build-up, the lack of, long-term storytelling, and we're getting it already here. So I am very happy to hear that.
I almost had to give it to the very first segment, too, with Bret Hart and that, but I had to go with a wrestling match over it, but that could have got it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of, my lowlight had to be the final match and the finish to the episode. we had so many points of just high points throughout this episode. Some low points to be sure, but the final match and the finish to this episode was just so anticlimactic given the build-up during the match, given the build-up over the course of the episode. And, this is the last episode of Raw in Canada, and Bret Hart wound up kind of looking like shit at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say that, but that's just kind of a fact with the way that this finished,
Yeah.
Bret wasn't doing this booking, someone else did, and it didn't make Bret look all that good. All right, with that being said, Joseph, do you have any contemporary wrestling news from on and around July 7th, 1997 for us?
Yes, from the Observer, Dave, I hate punctuation Meltzer, says that the crowd tonight was not as hot as the crowd in Calgary, but still a very good show. So he did enjoy this episode of Raw. He does not seem to like the stipulations for SummerSlam because he thinks that it's basically guaranteeing title changes with the stipulations that are being thrown out there. So he's not a fan of that. He did mention that the free-for-all match, so they have this booked all the way down to the free-for-all match already. He said that it's set to be Brian Pillman versus Goldust. So I thought that was an interesting free-for-all match.
Yeah.
And last piece of news here, I'm sure everybody is wondering where the most resilient, the most athletic superstar Shawn Michaels has been. He had his meeting with the WWF in Stamford on July 3rd, and he will be returning on next week's episode of Raw. And that is all.
So whenever you say that, Joe, I just picture that scene from The Simpsons where Homer pulls up and it's the Quickie Mart parking lot into the handicap space and then walks in dragging his leg as though he's handicapped. That's Shawn Michaels pulling into to Titan Towers and parking in the handicap spot and dragging his fake leg injury in through the front door. All right. Thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can email us at WRASSLINRAW. Just add at gmail.com to the end of that to submit questions or comments. Check us out on social media, on every podcast subscription platform. While you're there, don't forget to follow and subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and tell all of your friends to tune in to the most outrageous Monday Night Raw review podcast on the airwaves. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at the Raw that aired on July 14th, 1997, with matches featuring Yoshihiro Tajiri, Dude Love, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.